Good morning, everybody. Shavua Tov. Good Vach. Lovely to see you on Sunday morning. Thank you for joining us for Shema Bni seminar. We're back on track. There's been, Baruch Hashem, been busy with weddings and moving to Edgeware and lots of things in our new role at the Netzach Yisrael and Edgeware. So lovely to see you all. Thank you all for coming for a mini seminar to get some inspiration for Chanukah. 8 wonderful days are coming. So we thought we'd get together to strengthen ourselves and learn something together. So first I want to dedicate today's shiur. Okay, I think it's gone off. Sorry. As a refuah shalema for a young boy who's in concussion, and his name is... We'll just put in there. His name is... Yadon Yona Yechezkel Ben Shoshana Malka. She's a refuah shalema. Also, as I dedicate the shir to my brother-in-law as a refuah shalema as well, Yosef Aryeh Ben Miriam Freidel, and all other Cholim Masach Choli Yisrael. So, first of all, we'd like to call, very honoured, a good dear friend, Rabbi Kirsch, the leader, the founder of JLE, who's agreed to speak to us to prepare us for Chanukah. Rabbi Kirsch, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fantastic. Rabbi Danny Kirsch, Shlita.
You know, my father was a glove manufacturer, and don't go yet, Rabbi Steps. You just hold on for 1 second, and then you can go on it.
That's going to get chairs.
Okay, we can get. I'll take my time while you get the chair. But, my father was a glove manufacturer, and he had a wonderful way in the cold weather when he was trying to improve business. He used to go up to people and say, "My goodness me, you do look really cold," as an incentive for them to realize they are cold and need to go and buy a pair of gloves. And as we get ready for Chanukah, it always reminds me of the time. This is really one of the coldest times of the year. And as we need a little bit of warmth, I'm always excited to be invited by the radiator himself and to be asked to join in Shema Bni. And thank you for giving us a little bit of warmth in the cold, Rabbi. It's really a special honor. Last week our heating actually wasn't working. We had a whole week without heating, and it's a tremendous lesson to realize that warmth is something where you have to generate a little bit of yourself when it isn't working as well as you'd like it to be around you. And amazingly, this month of Chanukah, this month of Kislev, historically has actually had some very important biblical events take place in it. Most of us think about Tishrei, most of us think about Nisan, but actually Chanukah month, the month of Kislev, hundreds and thousands of years before Chanukah ever dawned on history, there were some extraordinarily important events. And those events give us a fascinating insight into our marriage and, please God, into our family obligations and responsibilities as well. When Noah came out of the flood, the tradition is it was right at the very end of the month of Cheshvan. In fact, the first sacrifice that he brought was in the month of Kislev, according to many. And the first rainbow that was ever seen in Jewish history as a reminder, as world history, as a reminder to the world of the fact that God would never destroy the world, was actually in this month as well. And according to tradition, the month of Kislev is the dawning of a new era, as if to say to the world. It's fascinating that before Noah was ready to go out and meet society, he sent a dove out. And that dove fluttered back and came back, of course, with a beautiful olive branch in his mouth. And many of us, when it comes to the messages and the insights as to what Chanukah represents, always think of it in terms of the olive. Of course, the message of peace and serenity of what the branch represents is also very important to us. Our rabbis point out, what was the symbolism that the beginning of society post the flood would be with an olive? What's the idea of an olive? The Talmud gives a number of examples. I'd like to share with you one of them. That is that God is saying, if you are now about to interact with the world, I'm going to teach you how to make light. The first symbol of a new world is how to bring light into the world. And that light, of course, is from the olives. Now, nowadays, thanks to Thomas Edison, we can get light from various carbon healthy, happy, blueprinted ways. But nevertheless, in those days, the primary method of getting light from the world was from the olive. And the symbol that Noah saw of a new world is an olive, which is the method of bringing light to the world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught Noah at that time that the new world you're going to build can be a world of partnerships. I'll be helping you produce the olives, but you're going to have to then transport and transfer the energy which is in the olive in making the light. Society can have light. Post the flood, there can be a new tomorrow which is better than the world that's been before. And you human beings are going to be the ones who are going to bring those olives and make them into the light, which will give light and clarity to the world. Just by the way, the Talmud says the extraordinary thing about those olives is the only way to get the oil out of it is to squeeze them. And sometimes you're going to have to squeeze very hard to get the light out that you want. The light of panosa, the light of education, but nevertheless the light is there, ready to be squeezed and ready to be brought out into the world. But there's another thing about that happened in Jewish history in the month of Kislev. And that, of course, is that after the sin of the golden calf, sadly the world was placed into dismal darkness. After all, the Jewish people have fallen from such height, of such light, of the giving of the Torah, such clarity, into a world of confusion with the golden calf. Yom Kippur marked the day where the Jewish people were forgiven for the golden calf, and we received 2 sets of light, 2 sets of tablets once again. Immediately after that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Jewish people, if you want to build, you can now build a home where I'm going to dwell within your midst. You can build a home with all of its artifacts, with its majestical building, which will be taken around with you wherever you go in the wilderness and eventually will become a home of the Beis Hamikdash. And that will become my home where you can find me at any time. According to tradition, that building started, the collecting fund for that building started immediately after Yom Kippur. And by the 25th of Kislev, everything that was needed for the Mishkan was ready. That means all the artifacts, all the articles, the gold, the silver, it was all made. And incredibly, those carpenters who suddenly became carpenters, because in Egypt we weren't carpenters, and those goldsmiths who suddenly became goldsmiths because in Egypt we weren't goldsmiths, were able to create the incredible Mishkan where God himself was willing to dwell. The Medrash says that was completed on the 25th of Kislev. God said, I only want it to be inaugurated, I only want the Chanukah to be in the month of Nisan, because that is the month of service of God, connecting to going out of Egypt, and also connecting to the birth of Yitzhak himself. But it was ready, completed, it was ready to go, had everything necessary on the 25th of Kislev. So we think about Chanukah in terms of the month of Kislev, we have to remind ourselves that an event of enormous ramifications, that was the building of God's home, was ready for operation on the 25th of Kislev. God chose to inaugurate it in Nisan. And incredibly, for anybody who's had builders in their house, it was extraordinary because the builders managed to finish it a few months before they said the end date was going to be. And not only that, but they managed to get all the mortgage and all the finances in way before they ever needed it. It was unbelievable. They had all the money up front that they needed. They had the gold, the silver, the tapestry. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu had to say, stop! I don't know if you ever had that with a builder where you have to say, you're going too fast. You're going to be completed ahead of time. Stop. But the Mishkan, the building which the Jewish people were going to build as their home for God, would have been ready, was ready early. And the commentators asked the question, how is it possible that the Jewish people who weren't skilled in making a Mishkan were able to build this extraordinary edifice? How is it possible that people who were used to being slaves and for the first time in their lives had the money which they got from going out of Egypt, etc., suddenly become great donors for this fantastic cause? How is it possible? And the Medrash tells us, based on the Pasuk in the Torah, that Vayavi kol ish asher nosa liboy, that people who were motivated, people who were excited about a project, people who believed in something, it's extraordinary what you can achieve. If you're motivated, if you believe in it, if you want it, you can do things far beyond anybody's expectations, including yourselves. Somebody once said to my father when he was working, Mr. Kirsch, how many people work in your factory? And my father said, about half of them. Now, he didn't say that because he's such a nice man. He wouldn't put down his workers. But when only half the people are working, then you don't get to manufacture what needs to be manufactured. But if the people are working, if they're dedicated, Chanukah, listen to that word, dedicated. If they're dedicated to a cause, if they believe in it, if they're passionate, then it is beyond human imagination what can be achieved, and the unbelievable becomes the believable. The first Chanukah came so quickly. The first 25th of Kislev was such an important historical date because the Jewish people dedicated their hearts, dedicated their mind, dedicated their resources to building a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this concept of really doing things with energy is really at the center of what it means to be a Jew. It's also quite amazing that if a person does something with energy, they begin to warm themselves up as well. You're sitting in a room and you feel a bit cold. You get colder and colder, and you just have less enthusiasm to do anything. I don't know if this is relevant to anybody here, but the longer you sit, the less enthusiasm you have. The Messiah Yesharim points out and says as follows, the idea is to serve God b'chol levavecha, with all your heart. Not just heart, but with all your heart, with all your might and with all your soul. Well, it's a bit difficult for me because I've had a long night and kids were up all night. Forget it, Rabbi. I mean, it's a nice idea, but it's hard. It's a miracle that I turned up here, Say the rabbis, it's b'chol levavecha, with all your energy. And the unbelievable things about human beings is, if they do something with everything they've got, they suddenly find energy which allows them to carry on much longer than they thought they were able to do beforehand. And experience tells you how that little pot of oil, if you can light it, it manages to burn much longer than you ever believed it was possible. I always quote at this time statistics from university graduates who tell us that they didn't work particularly hard for the majority of the first 3 years at university, but in the last 3 or 4 weeks, as it was coming towards the exams, I see some smiles on people's faces, as it last 3 or 4 weeks, as it's coming towards the exams, they suddenly ramp it up a little bit, and the 6 hours become 8 hours, which become 10 hours, which becomes 12 hours, and the coffee supplies get bigger. And somehow they manage to finish their dissertations, get ready for their exam, and the 4 weeks is a blur of hour upon hour of hard work. But you can do it. It's extraordinary what human beings are capable of doing it. You just need to turn up the revs a little bit, and then there's an internal dynamo which gets ignited by your own ignition. And as you push faster and as you push harder, it somehow allows you to have more and more energy. Now, you have to know when to say stop. And some of us overdo it to our own cost. And by the way, it's much better to be on a reasonably high volume throughout the 3 years than it is to suddenly do everything the last 3 or 4 weeks. But you know what you're capable about because of what you're able to ramp things up in those few weeks. It's mind-boggling. And scientists tell us and medical professionals tell us we have much more within us, but we need to get the heat going. The Messiah Yesharim says, extraordinarily, that in our inner motivation, sometimes we're not motivated. So the Messiah Yesharim says, what you have to do is you have to even pretend that you're motivated and get excited about it. Can't be bothered. Yes, I can be bothered. Even though you know you can't be bothered. Yes, I can be bothered. I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to give my energy. I'm going to turn that. I'm going to make it happen. All of a sudden, just by moving myself around, all of a sudden I'm getting warmer and warmer. And I can see from you watching me getting warmer, you're even warming up as well. That's incredible. And that's the nature of human beings. And the Messiah Yesharim says that's the nature of what spirituality is about. We are human beings, and as a result of that little bit of Newtonian physics, if you drop something, it generally falls downwards. There we go, a little bit of notice there. And that's because we're physical, and physicality prefers couches and comfy chairs. And spirituality prefers growth and opportunity. Spirituality, like the flame that we light, wants to go upwards. It wants to go that way. That's the Ner Mitzvah Torah wants to that, and the physicality wants to. Oh, it's been a long day. Now we understand, and we all need a rest, right? And your job is to pull out the couch for your wife whenever she looks a little bit tired. Is that okay? And make the cup of coffee for your husband when he's a little... That's no question about that. That's part and parcel of it. The nature of human beings is we like the couches and we're out of our way. But says Mr. Sashorim, the problem is that the couch becomes so powerful that we forget that our inner flame and an inner fire, which is there ready to be... whatever the word is to make it bigger. Help me with my... No, there's more than it actually is. It's there already. Fan, fuel. Thank you very much indeed for my fans and my fuelers there today. That needs to be fueled by you. And it's extraordinary because if you see in the early days of the birth of the Jewish people, this concept was central to how we were born as a nation. When my second grandchild to my son Moshe was born, the first child is called Sarah. And they decided to call the second son Avraham, which is very sweet. Avraham and Sarah, nice, lovely children. And at the bris, my son said, "Will you say a few words?" I went, "Oh no, I didn't know the name was going to be before." And son, you've got to like that, think of a word. So I suddenly thought to myself, you know what? You have to realize now you've given birth to a son called Avram. You shouldn't be upset if he wakes up early in the morning. So everybody's looking right. I said, because the pasuk says, "Vayashkem Avram baboker." Avram Avinu got up early in the morning. What does Chazal mean by that? That when he saw something needed to be done, it was spiritually important, it was morally important, that was the future of the Jewish people, that pushed him to say, I'm going to set all my internal alarms to make sure I'm up early in the morning to make sure it happens. And we learn from Avram Avinu that for spiritual matters, one tries to do things as early as we possibly can. Vayashkem Avram baboker, even though it may have been... And when it came to the Malachim coming to the house, he thought that they were visitors. The pasuk keeps on saying, and Avram Avinu hurried to do that, and Sarah would hurry, and she quickly ran to make sure the food, and they ran this way and that. The whole pasukim of the story of the angels coming to them is one run after the next run after the run. Motivating yourself, this is important, I want everybody around me to see what's important, and I'm pushing myself to achieve that goal. Rivka's chosen as a suitable wife for Eliezer. What an extraordinary woman, as for Yitzchak by Eliezer, what an extraordinary woman. But seeing the psukim there about how she ran to the well, and then she ran to fill the water up, and then she ran back to Eliezer to bring the water, and then she ran to the camels. And again, we see that energy is seen throughout. When the Jewish people are getting ready to leave Egypt, it's one speedy event after the next speedy event. And they're sitting there enjoying the family together, dressed with their rucksacks, with their shoes on their feet, because any minute now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could say it's time to leave. Now, quickly, get ready, everybody, now. And the birth of the Jewish nation with Avram and the birth of the Jewish people with the Exodus in Egypt all take place with the sense of this has to be done, and it's got to be done quickly, and this has to be something which everybody around us realizes is our priority, and we need to be energized and ready to do it. And that's why, amazingly, the matzah, which doesn't rise, Chazal say it mustn't become chometz. And from there we learn, mitzvah bo yoducha, if a spiritual opportunity comes to your hand, al tachmatzenu, don't let it become chometz. If any opportunity comes your way when it comes to spirituality, please make sure they're things which are done quickly, as fast as possibly. Obviously, it has to be done with speed in order that everybody's aware of the importance of it, but not speed which in some way belittles the importance. Because it's not speed to get it done, it's speed to show how important it is to me to do it. When I'm doing the action, I should do it in a relaxed way, but I'm energizing myself so centrally that the inner flame, the inner fire, which burns bright within the heart and the soul of the Jew, shows itself in the outer actions that I do. Amazingly, in Melachim, it talks about Shlomo Melech building the Beis Hamikdash. And there the Pesukim tell us that Shlomo Melech took, I think it was 14 years to build his home, and 7 years, I believe, to build the Beis Hamikdash. I have to check my quotes. And there on that, the Meforshim say, that's sending out some really important messages, which is, of course, I've got to put my makeup on. Don't get me wrong, you're looking lovely. And I had to come in and do my tints before I came in, right? Of course, I've got to make myself look good, no question whatsoever. But when it comes to spirituality, I'm going to spend more in my preparation time for my spirituality than I am when it comes to building my home. The home of real spiritual virtues, those things which are really important to the future of my family, future to ourselves and the Jewish people, they're going to be done quicker. There's a lovely story told about Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky on this. Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, who was a very small man, tiny. If he would be speaking here, literally, you could see his head just above the stender. Very small man. But in my eyes, he's a giant. Literally a giant, because what he achieved in his life and what he went through and what he became. So he's talking about people sometimes getting the confusion priorities in their home. And there was a man who made some money in Bnei Brak, and he was doing some building work on his home. And so Rabbi Galinsky's standing outside the home, and he sees the man talking to the architect. So Rabbi Galinsky goes up to the architect. He says, I much prefer if the windows were this shape than that shape. And the owner of the house is like looking a bit surprised that the rabbi's giving his builder directions. So he says, I think sort of the grey, whitish marble would be much nicer than the pink one you've chosen. Okay. And he's actually giving directions to the architect and telling the architect how the house should be built. And eventually the wealthy man turns to him and says, excuse me, sir, this is my house. Why are you giving directions to the architect? To which point Rabbi Galinsky says, well, you're only building it the way it's going to look in order that people like me should notice it and go, wow. So I'll tell you what sort of things that I like. And you'll get a bigger wow from me. The point is, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to my mitzvahs, when it comes to my Judaism, those are the things which I'm going to be sending out a message to all of those around me as to what's important. Ramasisyo Solomon says in a very interesting essay on this subject, a fascinating idea. We sing a song on Shabbos, Uvo Chulam Bevris Yachad, Yona Motza Bo Manoch. We talk about this dove that I was making reference to a little bit earlier, and how that dove on Shabbos finds rest. The Zohar says that the day that the Yonah found rest, the Yonah found a new world outside of the flood, was on a Shabbos. And anybody who's exhausted, Shabbos is a time to find rest. And we make that reference. It's interesting to connect the idea that we have. And in that song, we say the following words. Then they all joined together in a covenant. We will do and we will listen. They said as one. Then they opened their mouths and called out, Hashem is one. Blessed is he who gives strength to the exhausted. Very interesting song. We say, now, I'm sure a lot of you sing the Zemiris, but it's a very strange word that we're saying. We're talking about when the Jewish people all stood together, they said together at Mount Sinai, we will do and we will listen. And then Hashem is one, blessed is he who gives strength to the exhausted. Says Ramasisyo Solomon, on that song that we sing, this is the principle which we're talking about. When the Jewish people accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai, we realized that keeping Torah mitzvahs is going to take up a lot of our energy. Not only physical energy, not only mental energy, spiritual energy, emotional energy. To do this thing properly, we're really going to have to do our all. And therefore, we ask in our prayer to recognize the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the ability to be re-energized, to constantly have that light within us, to ensure that the fans are flamed, and that we never lose sight of when we stood on Mount Sinai, we accepted the Torah with energy, and we'll continue it with energy as well. There's an extraordinary story told about the Chofetz Chaim. I mentioned beforehand that our heating was off for a week, and Baruch Hashem, fan heaters do a great job, and we're here to tell the story. I want you to imagine life in Radin, 100 years ago, where there was very, very little heating at all. And perhaps a room was heated by a little coal fire in the corner, and you have to get pretty close to the coal fire to be warm. And then it was exceptionally cold all around. And the Chofetz Chaim would go to the mikveh on a daily basis, and he had a shamus there whose job it was to heat up a vat of hot water. And then before the Chofetz Chaim would use the mikveh, he would take the hot water and he would pour it into the cold mikveh, and the result would be a relatively warm mikveh. Chofetz Chaim, early in the morning, turns to Shamus, have you poured the water from the vat? Yes, I poured the water from the vat. So the Chofetz Chaim gets undressed and he goes into the mikveh, and it is freezing. It is freezing. So he jumps out and he goes, did you pour the water from the vat? Yeah, I poured the water from the vat. It's fine, yeah. Chofetz Chaim goes over to the vat and realizes that the water he poured from the vat wasn't that hot in the first place. The Chofetz Chaim said, I learned from this that if the water is not hot in the vat, then the water in the mikveh is not even going to be lukewarm. What's the message, he said? He says that if you want to influence other people, if you want to influence your family, and you want to influence and make other people aware of the power and energy, you've got to be boiling hot. And then the hope is at least they'll be lukewarm as a result of the heat that radiates from you. And if I'm not excited, if there's not that inner flame, is there not inner energy, it's really, really hard for the people around me to even be lukewarm. There was a famous teacher called Rabbi Silbowitz who often used to speak to this about teachers as well. And it's hard work being a teacher. The concept of having sabbaticals, which is for famous professors at university. I think every teacher in school should have a sabbatical, right? I think just for the security and spiritual growth of our children, it's a healthy thing because we all get tired. The nature of a tired. I think every family, if they have the opportunity, should take a couple of weeks off and re-energize themselves and look for places to go to which are re-energizing places. Because the nature of human beings we get tired and we get exhausted. And as a result of that exhaustion, we lose that inner fire, that inner flame, which is the Chanukah miracle, to keep us going forward. So we're sure Silvitz used to say, when he was running educational program for teachers, he says like this, I want you to imagine when your students coming into the class, imagine the class is very cold. So what do? You want to make sure the radiators are at least on high heat, because if the radiators are really hot, then hopefully it will begin to warm up the class. And he looked at the teachers and he says, your job is to become a radiator. Your job is to be a radiator. And I say to husbands and wife, and I say to parents as well, our job is to be radiators, because if we ain't radiators, then the classroom, the home, isn't going to be as warm as it needs to be. And it's hard, because we need to make sure that we're keeping re-energizing ourselves. We're making sure that we're feeding ourselves with the oil and the energy and the excitement, and we're finding time and places in our week to make sure we do that, because it's hard. It's not easy, but the impact is extraordinary. It's fascinating, because the Talmud says somebody who's careful about Shabbos lights and Chanukah lights, they're going to have children who are Talmidei Chachamim, which is a lovely blessing. What a great blessing, Please God. And it always bothered me. Why? Just because you've got a few candles in the house, you're going to have Talmidei Chachamim? So there's a number of answers to this. The first one is that the Chanukah lights represent, and we'll go into this in more detail, is finding that little pot of oil and making sure that that energy lasts longer than you can possibly believe it is. And you're bringing light. In the time of the Chanukah story, of course, there was great darkness, there's great confusion for the Jewish people in the Greek world, and they managed to find a little light to push away the confusion, and they had the clarity there. Therefore, the Chanukah lights represent the fact that where there's light in the home, that will, please God, influence all of those people in the home to search for that clarity and to search for that energy which is necessary. But the Shabbos candles is an extraordinary one that goes beyond that as well, which is, the Shabbos candles is to bring light into the home. Why, if there's light, will that affect the people in the home? And of course we know the Shabbos represents the harmony and the happiness between husband and wife. The harmony and happiness that exists in a home. And where there is harmony and when there is happiness, and that is the light which is felt in amongst the children, amongst the visitors, then that home becomes a home which is a beacon to all of those who visit it. And the chance of the children becoming Talmidei Chachamim, because they love the energy which their parents are creating, is so much greater. And I don't know what all the talks are going to be on this seminar, but I can just share with you that after many blessed years of being involved in the world of Jewish education, I can just tell you this, that when those Shabbos candles are burning bright, and there's a harmony at home, and there's happiness, then the difference to that home, and the difference to the family, and the difference to the house is incomparable. And if anybody wants to make significant investments in their lives, please buy as many candles as you possibly can, and all the metaphors which I mentioned in that. And invest as much time as you can into each other, because the more time you invest into each other, and the more love and caring and the more creative one becomes in that environment, the greater chance we have. And of course, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes we have pressures which are beyond ourselves. But nevertheless, I can only say that all light is light which will have the power and the impact which is there. And by the way, the Gemara points out, if Chalila, a person only has enough money for Shabbos lights and Chanukah lights, even though they're both rabbinic in origin, they're both obligated from the rabbis, you should light Shabbos candles and Chanukah candles. And even though the only way to do the mitzvah of Chanukah candles is to light Chanukah candles and advertise to the world the miracle of Chanukah, and Shabbos actually can be done in all mirrors away. You can say good Shabbos to people, you bring in Shabbos. You can make Kiddush, you bring Shabbos. You lots of ways. The Talmud says if you only have enough money for Shabbos lights and Chanukah lights, Shabbos comes first. And why does Shabbos come first? Because simcha, security, peace in the home, in the Jewish world has always been the absolute tops of everything. So we see that the energy which is created by the light, the energy which we're talking about here, of course, is the energy which is a message to all those around us about how important things are to me. I remember hearing a story many years ago from Rabbi Pesach Krohn about a Rabbi Heyman who was a teacher in a school in America. And I think this message is for us as teachers, us as friends, us as husbands and wives, us as parents. The message is a very profound one. And in New York, they have a thing called a snow day. Snow days are, guess what? It snows. Well done. And as a result of that, they have to close the schools. And the number of days during the year, they actually close the school. In England, if it rains a little, they close some of the schools. But in America, it has to snow seriously. And then they announce that there's going to be no school that day, etc., etc. 50, 60 years ago, Rabbi Heyman was teaching in a school in New York. And it was heavy snow. I don't think in those days they'd quite got to announcing snow days. But out of 30 boys in the class, only 4 or 5 turned up. And Rabbi Heyman at this time was already an older man. But he taught with the same energy and the same excitement and the same fire that he would teach whether there were 5 boys or 30 boys. And in the middle of his class with just the 4 or 5 boys there, he had to stop and take a breath because he wasn't a young teacher. And one of the compassionate, sensitive boys, they do exist, turned to the teacher and said, Rebbe, it's all right. There's just 5 of us here today. It's fine. Nothing to worry about. And Rebbe Heyman turned to them and says, there are not 5 of you. I can see hundreds of you here. Really? How do you do that, Rabbi? What do you mean? There's only 5 of us. I can see it. No, there are hundreds of you. He says, what do you mean there are hundreds of you? He says, because I'm teaching you and I'm teaching your children, I'm teaching your grandchildren, I'm teaching your great-grandchildren as well. So there are hundreds of you. He says, what do you mean by that, Rabbi? He says, because the way I teach you is what's going to influence you. The way I educate you about today's subject matter will stay in your hearts and minds, please God, for the rest of your life. The inspiration that you receive will be the inspiration you pass on. The flame that you get will be the fire that you pass on to the future. And therefore, I don't see my role as just doing what I'm doing now, but I see this as eternity. And there are not 5 people here, there are hundreds of people here. And when Jewish people light candles, when Jewish people set up flames, when Jewish people light Shabbos candles or Chanukah candles, we're part of a process which is forever and ever and ever. L'dor v'dor l'netzah nesachim, as we say in our prayers. And it's fascinating because the actual event of Chanukah in itself and our connection with this theme and these ideas needs some focus. After all, the Kohanim and Levium, the Kohanim, were the ones who were in the battlefront against the Greeks. The Greeks were in dominance, and the Kohanim had to fight to get the Beis Hamikdash. What's strange is Kohanim aren't supposed to be soldiers. If you see in Bamidbar where it talks about how the soldiers are prepared for war, you'll see that the job of the Kohen Gadol would encourage, speak, teach. The Kohanim would be davening, learning, carrying on the temple service, and the people would go out to fight in the battle. Generally speaking, when it comes to counting of the people, they're all counted for certain ages, because that's the age of 20 that they go out to fight in battle. Kohanim and Levium are counted from 30 because they weren't soldiers. So it's very, very strange in the Chanukah story that it turns out that the people who are fighting to get the vanquished Beis Hamikdash back again are the people who generally aren't soldiers. All the boys went to Hasmonean. No, sorry, the Hasmoneans, sorry. They aren't generally soldiers. They are... So the Bach, Rabbi Yosef, is bothered by this. And a very interesting essay, Reb Chaim Friedlander in the Sifsei Chaim asked the question, what is the significance about the fact that it was the Kohanim who were the one who end up fighting as soldiers for the Beis HaMikdash? And of course their heroism is remembered by the virtue of the fact that we are celebrating the Chanukah miracle still to this day and the freedom that we had as a result of them winning that battle. He says an amazing thing. He says the problem was that after a while the Beis HaMikdash, even the Beis HaMikdash, becomes, well, we brought our sacrifices yesterday, we'll bring them today. And ironically, even the temple becomes a place where you get used to doing things. I put on my tefillin yesterday, I'll put on my tefillin today. I lit Shabbos candles last week, I'll light them today. I took challah from my challahs 3 weeks ago, I'm going to do it again today. There's a monotony in life which unfortunately, even in the most holiest places, can affect our fire, can affect our relationship with God. I remember once going on an archaeological tour, and the archaeologist, the teacher, showed us some steps going from the Beis HaMikdash, where it appeared, from his description, that there was like steps, and then there would like be a little break, and then there were steps as well. And he wanted to suggest part of the reasons why in the temple they had the steps that way is to make sure that as you're running to or running from, walking from or running to the Beis HaMikdash, you mind your step, you stop and think a little bit. Because even going into the temple, the danger of monotony arrives. So it says Reb Chaim Friedlander, based on Rabbi Yosef the Bach, he says that the problem was that the Jewish people working in the temple, the Kohanim, began to get a little bit lackadaisical. They began to get a little bit of laziness. They had the energy when they started, but as time went on, they lost that energy. And because they lost the inner flame, the inner fire, then the temple, which was supposed to have its daily fires of the Mizbech, the daily light of the menorah, those lights were extinguished by the Greeks. The only way to get the fire back is to have the fire within propelling me to fight for that temple. So the Jewish people who lost the fire because they lost the inner fire, the very people who are supposed to be the trailblazers, the lighthouse, the energy for the world, the Kohanim, are the ones who have to reignite their inner flame to fight for the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore it was Dafka the Kohanim who had to fight to get the temple back, because it was they who had to have the inner flame to get the temple back, because the very essence of our service of God is with the inner flame. And it's no coincidence that what they found was the fire. The commentators point out that when Avram Avinu was given the mitzvah of bris milah, he was given it at age 99. Not a young chicken, not a young man, 99. It's extraordinary. And the commentators are bothered why it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu waited until Avram Avinu was 99 for him to do this mitzvah. After all, according to the Rambam, maybe he was 3 or maybe he was 40, but he was certainly a young man when he began his own journey in discovering God. And according to the Psukim, it seems quite clear that he kept all of the mitzvahs, whether they were mitzvahs d'Rabbanan or d'Oraisas, at a very, very young age. So why was it that the Almighty asked him at age 99 to do this mitzvah of bris milah? So there's a sefer called the Shach, not the Shach on the Shulchan Aruch, but the Shach, who is a pupil of the Arizal. And he has the sefer on Chumash, and he gives a very innovative approach as to why 99. And he says because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to teach the descendants of Avram Avinu, all of us who are children of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, that it's never too late to start new things in your avodas Hashem, in your service Hashem, even if they're very difficult things for you to do. There's no such a thing as Jewish retirement, as if to say, to put up your feet. Now, we know we're exhausted, and we've mentioned that before, and we know that we're tired, and in Mitzvah Hashem, Shema Bni is going to organize a 2-week holiday in Florida for all of us. Actually, the south of France would be quite nice. We don't have to get to Florida. Actually, Bournemouth would be quite nice. I mean, actually, a 2-week holiday. The bottom line is that Mitzvah Hashem will have it. We know we're exhausted, but says the Shach, The problem with human beings is that they reach a certain stage and they lose that energy, they lose that fire, and the reasons, because it's a hard life out there. Money and jobs and fears and family and a whole range of different things. I mean, it's understandable why we're all exhausted. There's no question about it. And there's many reasons to be justified. Says the Shach, but Avram Avinu is teaching us, even at 99, you can take on something which is very new and very special. And I heard from one of my friends, Rabbi Rothfeld, what's the significance of 99? Because the Mishnah in PRE-CHANUKAH tells us that at different ages in our lives, there are different challenges. Age 30, that's a time for strength. Age 40 is a time for wisdom. It goes through it. I've just turned age 60. Where are we up to age 60? Oh, that's old age. Oh, Baruch Hashem. I get a free bus pass now, by the way. Do you know that? I mean, I've paid tax for 43 years, so I should get it. Anyway, and it goes on and says, and then it says, Shema Bni, then it goes up to 100. And the Mishnah in PRE-CHANUKAH says, and when a person is 100, they're literally like dead to the world. This was written 2,000 years ago, literally dead to the world. Said Rabbi Rothfeld, for me, it's very significant that Avram Avinu was taken on a really tough service of God, 99, when he's just about still alive in terms of the way the Mishnah looks at it. Because you never lose that fire, you never lose that energy. And the miracle of the Chanukah story was that against all of the odds, the Jewish people find that pot of oil which allows them to carry on and keep that energy going. Friends, this is a really cold time of the year. Let's be honest. And as I told you at my very beginning, we lost our heating for a week and it gets cold. And one of the best ways to heat up the home is to start with the inner warmth. And it's amazing that if you have that inner warmth, not only do you warm up, but you warm up around you, the people around you. If you're excited, if it means something to you, the whole place becomes, health and safety understanding, ablaze with energy and positivity. And with that energy which you light, it has an enormous impact. And Chazal point out that the symbolism of the menorah is quite extraordinary, because the menorah which was in the temple is, of course, a place of wisdom, a place of spirituality, and a message, of course, that wisdom has a place constantly with our lives. What people have to appreciate is that the windows in the Beis HaMikdash were organized in a very special way. Usually you have a window to make sure that the light from the outside comes on the inside. However, when it came to the menorah, the windows were placed in such a way that the light from the inside of the Beis HaMikdash permeated outside, was sent outside. And the windows were created in such a way so the light from inside would go out, and we weren't that interested, interestingly enough, of the light from the outside coming in. When we light our Chanukah candles, we are sending a message out to the world that those Chanukah candles are the source of our energy. Those Chanukah candles represent the olive oil from Noah's flood of a new tomorrow. Got to squeeze them, and we know that sometimes we are well squeezed. But we also know that we have to squeeze each other, and we have to squeeze ourselves to get out as much oil as we possibly can, with a belief that the inner energy which is there is our continuity, is our confidence for the way forward. But we also notice that the Shabbos lights that we have in our home are also lights which radiate in. If the menorah was the symbol which is sending a message to those within and without that the Jewish people are alive and well, we also clear to ourselves that the lights that we're lighting in our house of the Shabbos candles are the lights which we light within. And our rabbis tell us, first and foremost, we light our Shabbos candles within the house, as if to say, to bring that sanctity and that happiness and that energy within the house. And as we do that, we create the energy and the confidence to have the Chanukah lights, which are lit just those 8 days during the year, which are sending a message within the house and beyond the house of the fact that the Jewish people are very much in business. As I mentioned beforehand, what I've been blessed to see over many, many years is those who keep the energy within going, those who fan the flames, those who have their ner tomid, which is their home and their house. That is the energy of excitement. That is the energy of being determined. That is the energy of passion. That is the energy which says, I want those flames, I want those fires. And please God, we should all be blessed to take the flame which is within, that fire with the in, and inspire all of those people around us. And I think it's a great honor to be in a room full of lighthouses. It's a great honor to be in a room full of people who want to spread that light. But it's also a great honor to be in a room with people who appreciate that if I get the light right inside, then the light will, please God, emanate out. And it should be with great energy and excitement. And you should have a lichtige, a delightful Chanukah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kirsch. Amazing. Thank you. Just everybody now, we can have a break for 10 minutes. There's donuts. We've got jam donuts. There's custard donuts. There's cream donuts. And the donuts for the children, we're going to give at the end for you to tidy them up afterwards. So that we got donuts for them when you leave for the little ones. So please feel free, have a schmooze, have a chat. It's better not to, the kids are very calm, everybody's good, so best to just leave them and just chill in here. The kitchen's in, the urn is boiled now. There's some herbal teas out, so please enjoy the break, and we'll see you for part 2 of the pre-Chanukah seminar in a moment. Thank you, Rabbi Kirsch. See you soon.